friends, keep hitting the like, keep dropping your comments. Give us what you want us to talk about. If there's something important to you, drop it in the chat. Let us know, because we want to talk about the things that are important to you. So thank you for joining us for this show today. This show is about the social emotional well-being of our students. There has been so much talk about learning loss, what is going on academically with our students. But today I want to talk about how our students are doing, how they're feeling inside, how they're processing this year of distance learning, how they're processing the pandemic, and for many, many students, processing loss. There has been great loss to many of our students. And so we have a great show lined up, a panel of parents, two guest experts. But before we bring on our guests, I would like to share a video with you.
You know better than anyone how your child's life has been impacted by COVID-19. And although kids are remarkably resilient, many are struggling to adjust to the changes. This is only natural. The routines that once gave them a sense of control have been erased. Their classrooms have become computer screens, their friendships put on pause. It's understandable they might feel irritable, frustrated, or sad sometimes. Loneliness, confusion, and anxiety are also common. But as a parent, how do you know if your child's emotions are a normal reaction to an abnormal situation? Or if what you're seeing are signs of more significant mental health challenges? At the Society of Clinical Child and Adolescent Psychology, we have tips and resources to help you identify and address your child's mental health needs, including free, confidential mental health assessments and information about how to find professional help. If you're concerned your child is experiencing severe sadness, anger, or maybe even depression, ask yourself these questions. Is your child no longer interested in doing things they once enjoyed? Have their eating and sleeping habits changed? Are they having trouble finishing tasks they used to find easy? Have they talked about wishing they were no longer alive? Changes such as these could be signs your child needs help from an adolescent mental health professional. During the coronavirus pandemic, many mental health professionals are offering online support. This means safe, convenient treatment options are available regardless of where you live. For more information about the symptoms of childhood depression and to find out what kind of help is available, visit effectivechildtherapy.org.
All right, everyone. So now I'd like to introduce our panel of guests.
This is the checkers game where...
Well, that was technology at its finest. It happens, guys. It happens. We weren't expecting that, but here we are. So I want to just hop right into the conversation. But first, I'm going to tell you who we're talking with, who's here to help support us. And then we're just going to talk about some things that are going on for us. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. If you have concerns, drop them in the chat. If I don't get to them today, someone will get back to them. Someone will respond to them when the show ends. Okay, so first up, we have Sherry Warner, and I'm just going to read her bio, not even going to try to memorize it. Sherry is a professional educator with over 20 years experience, both in private and public sector. She holds a Bachelor of Arts in Liberal Studies, along with a Master's of Science degree in Educational Psychology and Counseling. Sherry's passion lies in working with educators, parents, and children. She is highly experienced as a school leader who has worked tirelessly to support and develop the maintenance of socially, emotionally, and cognitively safe schools for all students and adults. In her book, In Safe Hands, Bullying Prevention with Compassion for All. It was published in 2012, and it addresses the necessity of creating social and emotional safety in addition to academic excellence in every school environment. So we want to welcome Sherry. And then we also have today Dr. Levita Johnson. And as you see, her sign says Dr. V. I love when doctors go by Dr. V or Dr. first name, because I feel like it makes you so much more accessible. And so Dr. V is joining us not from here in LA, but from Florida. I used to live in Florida, guys. And she has done a lot of work in Broward County School District and Palm Beach County School District. Dr. V is a transformational professional coach specializing in personal, family, leadership, organization, and education development. She has a background in education and has spent countless years working with general and gifted education students and students with special educational needs. Her articles have been featured, and her work has been featured in Black Girl Own, Teacher to Teacher Education, Essence Magazine, Modern Women in Action, and the list goes on and on. And so welcome to our experts for being here to help support our families. And then we have families joining us here today too. Now, I always just want to hop right in because we run out of time like so fast on these. And so welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. Just by a show of hands with my parents here, how many of you feel that your student or your children, should I say, have struggled emotionally during this past year of distance learning and the pandemic? Yeah, I'm a parent too. I'm raising my hand too. Awesome, awesome. I want to start with Lily. And Lily, I would like you to offer your child's grade or age, and then just tell us some of the things that you've noticed.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lily. I have a son who is 13 in the 7th grade, and I have a daughter who is 11 in the 5th grade. And my two children have reacted very differently to the challenges during this pandemic. One of my children seems to have been able to really thrive even and is doing fine with distance learning. The other child, I just noticed steadily throughout the course of the quarantine has just been decompensating emotionally, psychologically, in terms of grades, going from being an honor roll student to really, not doing so great academically. And it's been really heartbreaking because you want to help your kids, but a lot of what they're struggling with is not something that you can control as a parent. So I've tried to give them grace and then also demonstrate that I'm giving grace to myself during this period of time. And as much as possible, reaching out to other parents. I'm not shy about casting a wide net to both people I know, or if I happen to be in Target and the person behind me looks slightly miserable, immediately I'm like, doesn't this suck? and hopefully I feel like it's all those little connections throughout the day that are almost like islands that kind of keep us going, make us realize we're not by ourselves, and sometimes that's just enough. And then with the kids as well, encouraging them to do things like be on Zoom with their friends, even though they're already Zooming a lot, being outside, and then just really telling them, I think the most important piece is to make it clear that what they are feeling is okay. Just affirming, yes, this situation is awful. Yes, what you're feeling is totally normal. And yes, we will get through it.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Lily.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to have a couple of others who raise their hand to share with us. And then I want to go to Sherry and Dr. V to talk to us about some of this. Let's go with Marie.
Hi, I'm Maria Elena. I have two children in charter school here in West LA, and one of them is in first grade, my daughter, and my son is in fourth grade. They were both challenged by the distance learning model at the beginning, and we opted to put them into a learning hub so that they would have more support and be out of the home, because I'm working from home and my husband was working from home at that time too. So they've struggled emotionally. In fact, we were interviewed by a number of media outlets because especially my son was saying things like, I don't want to be here anymore. My life sucks. They both never played a video game before COVID and were definitely addicted to certain video games. And my daughter was slightly more engaged in the distance learning. She could at least engage with her class. My son just refused. He just refused to even log on. And so it became such an issue that we had to have a program designed by the principal and his teacher for a combination of offline learning, some like morning meeting only, like really no other online learning, to get him off a screen just to kind of detox his brain. And then his work was really just do one assignment a day. Like we kind of had to get him back into distance learning because he was so disengaged. He was so angry. The video really summed it up. They said, have you noticed signs of irritability and frustration and sadness in your children? And things have gotten better since the sun is out, since some restrictions have lifted, since there's not as much of a dire feeling in LA. And, my son started sports again. He started basketball, and that has so helped him. I mean, mentally and emotionally, it has been the key thing, but it was missing from his life for months and months and months. And even last night, even though I know that things are better with both of them, my son refused to go to the learning hub this week. My daughter said last night before bed, I just hate my life. And so it's still there, even as things begin to open up. And I've noticed that change has really become very difficult for them. I got a new mattress in my room, and she cried because I was changing something in the environment. We painted her wall because it had a chip in it, and she got upset about that. So these little things that you kind of wonder, like, well, what's so upsetting about painting your wall? I just don't want anything more to be different, right? So that's been my
great place. That's a great segue into a question that I want to talk to Sherry and Dr. V about. And thank you for sharing that. Norma and Myra, I did not forget about you. I'm going to get to you. But I think that's a great segue into parents sort of identifying what is normal behavior and what is a little askew since we've been in the pandemic, and what those things might look like crying over painting a wall, because it's just different. So I'm just going to say, Sherry, hop right in there and just talk to us about how to sort of identify what is just normal child and what just could be signs that something else is going on.
Right. Yeah. Well, there are situational upsets, and then there's chronic upsets, right? And so COVID has brought situational upsets, but it's a long term. So it isn't just like, okay, so-and-so died and they're grieving for X period of time. This is going on for a long time. And so I think, as suggested in the video, that it's really looking for signs of my child is sleeping too much, not eating well, not caring about regular activities, telling me, as Maria Elena suggested, I don't like my life. I don't want my life. Those are signs where you really need to get help. That's just not normal. But the everyday, this is a drag, this is terrible, is a great discussion. And it's an ongoing discussion where we really just need to listen and validate feelings, and even a little bit, to the degree, share a little bit about how it's affected your life as a parent, not putting all your stuff on them, but really acknowledging, this has really been hard for me too. I really missed going out to dinner. I haven't seen my best friend. So those things, I think, are helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. And Dr. V, I'm going to ask you to jump in there.
So definitely all the things that Sherry shared are applicable. I think, sometimes the challenge really is that nothing about this is normal. And so some of the things that are popping up right now in kids' lives kind of become the new normal response to what's happening in something that they've never experienced before. And so it's just really important to have those conversations. And as Sherry said, explaining to them how you're feeling without, being too transparent, because again, kids can carry that and they start to internalize that stress as well. But continuing to keep that open dialogue and letting children know that it's okay to have a range of emotion, and really validating whatever it is that they're experiencing, and being cautious that even though sometimes a child may be sleeping more, that really is their body's response to self-care and saying, hey, I'm really overwhelmed right now and I need to take a nap. I need to de-stress, and that's the way that I'm going to do that. And so really paying attention, and only you as the parent know your child. And so I think in combination with having those conversations and really observing the way that they are managing their emotions through this is going to be the best combination that you can take.
Thank you. And so before we go on to hear from the other two parents, I would like to just ask, with the different age ranges, your kinder through fifth grade may have a different approach to supporting, and may have actually sort of exhibit something different than like your preteen or teenager would. I noticed in my own 13-year-old an irritability that I call it often just everything's trigger point. Everything's trigger point. And I'm like, I don't even understand like what's triggering right now. But I also am learning that it's somewhat of the long-term effect of this and his sort of dealing mechanisms now. But I think parents don't always see the signs of like what could be off. So I'm hearing from parents, oh, my kid is just spending too much time on gadgets, way too much time on gadgets. But maybe, I don't know, is that a coping mechanism for what is happening? Maybe it's not, they're just absorbed in it. It's just a way to escape what else is happening. And so I know I hear a lot, in my parent group about things like that, like too much time on gadgets, snacking too much, sleeping too much. And so could you talk to us a little bit about like what some signs may be that your child isn't necessarily processing this the best? I'll go to Sherry or Dr. B.
Okay. So listen, I mean, teenagers particularly, they live and breathe socially. And as a part of their development, they actually need to be around other kids in order to help define themselves away from their parents, right? So that's developmentally what they're doing. And now we've taken them and said, you're here with your parents and there's no social interaction. And so particularly for those teenagers who are needing that for their development, it can be very jarring and troublesome. So I think the more that kids can be social, first of all, they've given, we always talk about, oh, how much computer time should they get? Well, now it's like, it's a free for all, right? So we've given them permission to be on these gadgets, 15, 16 hours a day, because there's nothing else for them to do. And so we feel like that's all we have to offer. And so there's part of the online learning that's happening, but there's also part of the, addiction and escape of just going internally with the computer. So one of the best things I have found for young children and for teens is to really put them on a schedule. Because what's happening is they're just losing all sense of what's going on. They're getting up at weird hours, they're going to sleep at weird hours. So it's really like a schedule that they help set, where this is when you're going to get up. You give them a list of things that need to happen. You need to get up, you need to get yourself fed, you need to get dressed and groomed, and you need to do your schoolwork. Fine, we're going to do that between this time. After school, these are the things that must happen. You have to be physically active. You have chores to do. You have homework to do, and then you have socializing. And so let's set a schedule for when all of those things are going to happen, and they are going to happen each day. And so that they don't just get, into that lazy routine of there's nothing, I'm not doing anything but being on the computer. So it's really important that they have that set schedule, that they help participate in that schedule, and that they're held accountable to that schedule to give some sense of normalcy to the day. So that's one tool I think is really helpful.
Awesome. Thank you. I think that is very important, the lack of schedule. Dr. V?
Definitely. Schedules, routines are very important. And I always still put in a caveat and say, because this is brand new and no one has experienced this before, to always be open to revisit those routines and schedules, because it just may not be working. And each and every day, kids are experiencing something different. An additional thing is give kids and teens options. Like Sherry said, they are forced to be on screens all the time. So what else can I do? What are some healthier options for me? Because truthfully, if they're leaving the house and they're going to school, their routine looks very different. It is built in social interaction. There are moments where they are doing all kinds of activities that we as parents, and I too am a parent, that we don't even know what's happening, right? And so they're really grieving the loss of that, and they're looking to us as parents to provide them with additional options, because they are children and their brains aren't fully developed in a way that they know how and what those healthy options are. So it's really important that you explore alternative options. And even if it is going to be on technology, putting them on things that look at creating safe spaces for relaxation and meditation and things like that, so that they can find alternatives to what it is that may or may not be healthy. And again, I caution you to say, my child's spending too much time on video games. Maybe they're not. Again, that it could be something that they really need to be able to do. And you as the parent are going to know when too much is too much, and you start to see that change in their behavior.
Awesome. Great points. It's funny, my son, who is 13, I would early on in this, I would say to him, like, you're on gadgets too much. You've got to do something. So he started finding exercise videos, and he would say, I'm on a gadget, but I'm exercising, Mom. I'm moving my body. And that I could not argue with. At that point, I'm saying, you're right, you are. And so I think helping them to find options, or sometimes they find them on their own, but helping them to find options of how to utilize what they have. That was a time when, I was doing the mom thing of, you're too much gadgets, too much gadgets, too much gadgets. And then he found the whole workaround. Oh, but I'm doing a workout, and he was sweating. And then I say, well, you got that one, buddy. And you can do that one, put it in your schedule every day. That's a good one. So awesome advice. I'm going to go to Norma, and then I'm going to go to Maida.
Hi.
Norma.
Yes, I have a daughter that is an 8th grader. And she goes to Alliance MIT, a charter school. And she was doing great before the pandemic, and she was working on getting honor roll certificate because her grades was up. She speak up, and she's a good leader. And then all of a sudden, when the pandemic came, she started her grades going down, even for children that are getting doing summer school, and it was very hard on her. I can see that the pandemic has been created this globe that we are all surrounded, and it's only like this. And then all of a sudden the school starts again, and her grades went up, but all of a sudden she started going down, irritable. She gets so frustrated. She wants to get out. I say, Mommy, I want to get out. At least you go to the grocery, but what about me? I don't see nobody. You still jeopardizing me when you get out. What about me? I'm not the type of person that's going to stay home. I said, I don't want to get out. So she started getting very frustrated, and now she's spending a lot of time. We ended up, not gonna say the details, but we had to get a psychology and therapist. And we ended up, she was saying that I make her do a lot of work, which is not true. She didn't want to brush her
I think,
teeth.
Norma, that might be a typical teen.
Yeah, so she's still using the gadgets 24/7. I don't let her at night, but all the rest of the day she's on the computer talking. So now we set up a date that she does dishes because she didn't want to do it. It's very hard now that the doctor Dr. B said, I was thinking that it would be good to create a training workshop for parents, how to create schedules, how to do the scenario, because it is fine to say, me, I do it without saying it, but how you gonna create a kid that doesn't wanna listen to you? So it will be good to put it in their minds, not in mine. Mine, I'm okay, but they don't want to do it. She is. Okay, no,
Yeah.
it doesn't work with me. And so I'd rather her be on the phone because she start having mental thoughts, like you said, arrugar, it cut me arrugar, and we changed our life completely from my husband to me and everything. I'm on 24/7 here, and you would never imagine. I became a super mom, which I never thought I was going to be a super mom. So, and you create all these spaces. I'm not good at, I was good in school, but not that great. So, but I always was by myself, and I did it on my own. But with her, I had to create a world for her because I didn't have nobody to, and it's still in here that I'd rather her be on the computer than not having it in this world.
So there are a couple things that I want to address here with Dr. V.
Okay,
Sherry.
thank you.
Thank you, Norma. Thank you. And let me just say this, Norma. All us moms are super moms. Whether we're wearing our capes or not, at some point or another, we are. So yeah, bravo to all the moms. And that does not negate dads, but right now we're talking about moms. A couple of things. So one thing I heard was her daughter ended up getting mental health services. How do parents determine when it is time to get mental health services? I know we hear as parents the obvious, like there's the obvious when your child just says, I don't want to be here anymore. That's a time. But there's incremental pieces, I think, leading up to that. And how do parents listen for that and know, like this is not something that I'm going to be able to help in the way it should be helped? How do they know it's time?
Yeah, so some of the things that were already mentioned really in the video really hit the nail on the head. But one of the biggest things is really a loss of interest. What you should expect from a student who is experiencing this pandemic is that they're seeking the things that they're interested in, right? And so when you start to see them detach from the things that they naturally enjoyed, and we're not really talking about the social things because those are deeply impacted already by the pandemic itself. But when there are things that you know that they love to do at home, whether it's they love art or they love to dance or they love to listen to music, and you start to see them detach from those sorts of things, those are moments when you need to start to pay attention. When you start to see them also detach from family and friends, knowing that they are so social, if they start to not show that interest, not ask to be around people, that's something that you need to pay attention to. Always recommending that families and caregivers pay attention to children's body language. Oftentimes our children give us signs just simply through their body language, the way that they sit, their mannerisms. And when you start to see changes in that, it's really important to start having discussions. And if you see that your kids are not communicating with you, it never hurts to go ahead and say, let me reach out to a professional, right? Because what we don't want to have happen is kids are great. They're great at masking really how they're feeling. And not only do they don't do it on purpose, a lot of times they just don't know how to express those emotions. So really paying attention to things like that. Obviously expressing thoughts of hopelessness is a telltale sign for a parent to be concerned, and really just that overall disruption in what it is their day-to-day life.
Yeah.
And I would just add to that. sometimes you can just ask your child, hey, I've noticed that you seem to be feeling down or anxious or having a hard time. I'm wondering if you'd like to talk to somebody. You know, sometimes it helps to talk to somebody that isn't in your family about what's going on. And I think normalizing that and just giving them that option, regardless of what age they are, and then letting them know, hey, you know what, sometimes I have to talk to somebody outside the family and it's really helpful. And I'm wondering if you'd like to do that as well. So I think offering them just straight out the opportunity could be really helpful.
Very good. I never thought of that one, just asking your child if they want to. We're always, looking for ways to help our kid. And just asking, like, nail on the head, Sherry. Thank you for that. Let's go to Maida, and I'd love to hear from you about what you're experiencing.
Hello. So I'm the mother of two students with disabilities, a seventh grader and a high school freshman. And they are considered twice exceptional because they're also identified gifted as well. And they were already diagnosed with mental health conditions prior to the pandemic. So we already had a support system in place with providers, both through their IEPs at school. They both, see the school psychologist, they have counseling services, et cetera. But we were also receiving services at home, and those continued even through the pandemic. Some still in person at home. We have ABA providers that come to our home every day. But we also have outside mental health providers too that we've been seeing virtually. But I've seen through the pandemic that it exacerbated their conditions, particularly for my youngest son. And he's not afraid to speak out about it. He advocates for himself, but it increased suicidal ideation. And so that was something that was really hard for us as a family, particularly because we already knew that this was an issue prior to the pandemic. And then really, I have, two children, particularly him, who's already socially isolated because of his disability, then to go into distance learning only, where he really couldn't develop those connections, those relationships with his fellow students. So it was really difficult for me to see as a mom, like, what is it more than I could do that we're already doing now, that your school is doing, that outside in the community that we're doing. And for my older son, he's a freshman in high school. Because again, his disability, he depends on those relationships he builds with the school community to support him. And I had kids who were both honor roll students, and now they're failing all their classes. And my high school student, he's always wondering, he's like, am I going to get to graduate high school because of what's happening? How is this going to impact me when I come back to school in the fall? I don't know anyone here. I haven't developed those kinds of connections I expected to. And so, as a parent, really see them struggle with that. It's without really me not having any solutions for them. It's pretty hard. I will say this, that one of the things that apart from, seeing them both pretty much avoid going to school, that's been really hard, trying to get them engaged, participating in class. But outside of that, we've noticed that one of the things that did help is giving them an outlet for their own personal interests or hobbies. So, my middle school student loves to draw. So then one of the things that he did was I got as many artist supplies as I could and just giving him that space for him to really work on those things that he really likes. As older brother, it's more about, I do want to play video games. I know that's something that he's really good with. And he has friends that, they go to other high schools. So then we said, well, then use this time to hang out with your friends and really interact with them in that way to continue those relationships. Because unfortunately with him, if he's not prompted, he doesn't know that he needs to communicate with his friends. And that's something that he's still developing as a skill. But I've noticed that at least in that aspect, that is one thing that as a mom, I've been able to support them with. But as far as the other stuff, it's, one of the things that I keep in mind is not really like, yes, things are getting better. And I keep telling them that, so let's be optimistic. But I'm still more concerned about the fall when we fully reopen. Our kids, how are they going to be supported in getting back to that new normal? Because it's not what was pre-pandemic. How they're going to get used to those new routines or that new school environment, and I don't have those answers for them.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Myra. Sherry or Dr. V, would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, that's a really, everything you mentioned is just really, really tough and definitely challenging for special ed kids and kids with special needs. So I think one of the things that she mentioned is the hobbies, encouraging hobbies and really getting into them and really kind of taking interest in your child's hobbies. I know that I have 17-year-old twins who are my brothers, but we had been raising for a while, my husband and I, and they're really into skating. So it's like, great. My husband built a skateboard ramp. You know, they're skating, they're showing us all their moves and tricks, and we're just being really interested. It's right out front of the house. You know, they can just, you know, skate right there. So, I mean, we've been really trying to kind of take an interest in that. And then really, as much as possible, now that things are opening up, is to get your kids with other kids socially. It's just critical. And there's so many ways that we can do that now. And of course, each family has a different comfort level, but there's a lot of kids and families playing in parks. Somebody mentioned that their kids back to playing basketball. So even sitting around in a circle with your friends on the grass, just getting really creative now about how we can get our kids socializing. In terms of coming back in the fall, it is going to be really challenging. We're going to take kids who have been on a computer 10 or 12 or 15 hours a day, and we're going to now put them in a classroom. And so their attention span is going to be different. The way they interact with other kids and teachers is going to be different. Their whole orientation. Some of them are going to be, you know, even anxious about going to school, because the kids who never had been before, because just being put at home and left there for so long with only a computer. So there's a lot of work that the schools are going to have to do, a lot of counseling. And I think, in my opinion, at least the first couple months of school is really going to have to be focused on social and emotional development and learning. And that's going to be challenging for parents, because a lot of parents feel that their kids are academically behind. But I think at this point, we really have to put their emotional and mental well health in the forefront, and their socialization skills that they need to redevelop. So I think that there's going to be a lot of counseling needing in the schools, a lot of education for teachers about how to bring our kids back and how to develop those connections again and those relationships going forward.
Indeed. Thank you, Sherry. Dr. V?
Sherry definitely summed it up. I think one of the things that I would love to really address is reminding parents, caregivers, that you are your child's biggest advocate. So when it's time to go back into those buildings, that you absolutely communicate with the school, you communicate with the teacher exactly what your child needs. And that does not mean that you're not going to receive some pushback, because you probably will. However, you have been at home, or with like Maria Elena saying, you know, we put our children in pods because that was what made the most sense for our family. But also even speaking to, listen, this is what I've seen academically that my child needs. And I understand that you're the expert. However, for the past year and some change, I've been the expert, and I'm the one that's really been at home and going
Right.
through this with them. And so as a parent and as my child's first and most fierce advocate, here is what I believe that my child needs academically and also socially and emotionally right now. And really holding schools, principals, teachers, all educators accountable for that, and saying, this is exactly what I feel like needs to happen. Scheduling parent teacher conferences out of the gate. Don't wait for them to say, hey, you know, 9 weeks in, let's have a conference. No, I want to have a conference the first week 2 of school. And I know it's very overwhelming. However, I really want to sit and make sure we have a solid plan in place for my child. And I really want to come back and revisit it, because I'm an educator by background. However, you have to hold schools accountable for what it is that they're delivering, both educationally and socially and emotionally, for students.
Oh, very good point. We're going to go with Maria Elena, and then Lily, and then Norma. Very great point. Advocate, advocate, advocate for your child.
We had to really advocate to take our child off the screen. And the message from the school was, this is the way we're delivering learning. So your child needs to adapt. And what we were saying is, our child is not showing up. He's not even engaging at all. And he was a grade level ahead, and now he's a grade level behind. We've got to get him somehow re-engaged. And we had requested meetings with the teacher, which didn't necessarily produce anything. Then we had to go to the principal. Then we had to share that he was having some mental health concerns. And while they couldn't provide support at the school, we did get a private therapist for him. Eventually, after we came together with his teacher and the principal and said, we really need to make a plan that's going to work for our child, because he can't just be on the screen the whole day. He's not going to do it. And we can't have a child that's not showing up for school at all. So it really did take that advocacy, Dr. B, and we pushed for it. And they wrote out a program that said, he has to participate in, do at least X amount of reading per day. And then we had the teacher at their hub try to enforce that and help guide him through that. And he's still not on a screen very much during the day, which I actually feel is really good for him. The school doesn't like it, but they're amenable because we required it, because it's what our child needs. So advocacy, advocacy, advocacy.
Absolutely. Lily?
Yeah, I was just going to piggyback on the advocacy piece of it, where with my child, he had some mental health issues prior to the pandemic, and we had already been somewhat in the process of finding a psychologist and a psychiatrist for him. And this kind of just pushed us, really sped things up. And we're lucky that eventually we were able to get a 504 in place for him. But even prior to that, my husband and I are of the mind that if you don't ask, you don't get. So there's nothing wrong with asking. So, pardon my French, I don't mind being the pain in the ass. I try to do it with a smile on my face and like lots of grace. But at the end of the day, as Dr. V said, I am my child's fiercest advocate. And for me, it shows him that I have his back. And it even extends to outside of the classroom. So for example, he just started his soccer games back up. He will only play in Santa Monica because he's really worried about COVID and they have the masking mandate. And at a recent game, he noticed that there were children on the field with him who did not have their masks on. And so I saw his face and I was like, I got this. And I went and I found somebody to come and deal with it. And he saw that. And I would like to think that he knows that no matter what happens, no matter how scary it gets out there, like he's going to have one person who's willing to go to bat for him. And then at the same time, hopefully that also empowers him that he can also ask for himself. And like for a 13-year-old kid, that can be a scary thing. But every time he speaks up, even if it's to me, and he'll say, hey, mama, that wasn't cool, I'll think about it. And I'm like, he asked me respectfully. And did I overstep? Was I wrong? And if I feel like I was, I'll let him know, because he deserves to know that he has a voice as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. There was a question in the chat that asked, what if your child just refuses to go to therapy? So we all know, especially in some communities more than others, seeing a therapist has a stigma attached to it. And so, families, not just students, are a little more resistant to therapy. So what do you do if your child says, yeah, I'm not going to see a therapist because that's for those kids?
So I think you have that conversation. I believe Sherry said this, really just talking to them about it, destigmatizing, explaining what benefits there are, because you hear the word therapist and again there's this stigma behind it. And so really being open and honest and saying and explaining how this can help, seeking ways to explain things in child-friendly ways. And even for teenagers, it's especially important to bring it down, because their brains are at a certain level where they want to think and behave like adults, but developmentally they aren't. And so they try to make meaning from things that they believe make sense of what they've seen in movies or on television about therapy. And if you've even gotten to the point where your child is in therapy but really isn't engaging, then you haven't found the right therapist. And I always stress that, because the right therapist is going to be able to break through to your child, always. So never give up. Don't feel like just because my child isn't engaging with this particular therapist, there are so many that have different methodologies of how they approach working with children, and you just have to find the right one to build that relationship with them.
Awesome.
And I would just add that sometimes when you know that your kid needs something and they're refusing, it's time to say, hey, you know what, we need to do this, and I will go with you. We'll meet the therapist together, and I'm going to ask you to give it 3 tries. Okay. After 3 sessions, if you don't like this, we'll either find somebody new or we'll reevaluate whether we need to go. But this is a decision that we've made that really needs to happen. And you can either do it by yourself, or I will actually go with you and we can talk together about this. So that can be helpful as well.
Right. And then I think, Marie, you dropped in the chat that you know of a therapist that plays video games.
Yeah, and I have a few friends whose children's therapists also do that, but my kids were obsessed with Roblox.
Roblox.
And we were pretty sure that my son was not going to do therapy. And she said, well, what I do is I connect with them through the game. And so my son saw it as an opportunity for extra video game time. And now he really looks forward to those sessions, not because of the video game time, although that is part of it for sure, but she's relating to him in his own world and at his level. So I thought it was kind of brilliant. I wasn't so happy because we're trying to get him off of Roblox, but for that reason, for him to say yes and for him to be engaged in that, it was worth it. And there are therapists who do that and offer it.
Yeah, I think that it's really important to note right now, more than ever, seeing a therapist is a lot more convenient than it ever was before. So many therapists are seeing you over Zoom, are sort of, for the tweens and teens, sort of hanging out with you by playing video games with you or watching your favorite show with you. And through that conversation and dialogue, they get to all the other dialogue that gets your child to open up and share how they're feeling emotionally. And then because their guard is so let down, they also are able to hear the therapist, and get some tools. I have an only child. I work in my home all day long. And so there was a lot of just us interaction. I'm a single mom, and it just became too much. And so we started together seeing a therapist, and we have together time and we have alone time, because I too need someone to talk to through this. And so, but his time looks different than mine, because his time looks like hanging out. It doesn't look like what I think tweens and teens think it is. Go lay on the sofa and, spill all your deepest, darkest secrets to a stranger. It looks very different. And so you as parents should know that. And you should also know that you don't have to risk your health by going into a facility right now, because a lot of it just happens over Zoom. And it's a more comfortable over Zoom. I know our kids are on Zoom all day long, every day. I know that. And they're on video games, but this is a more comfortable, relaxed, because they're hanging out with a friend. And that, I think, is worth exploring, especially if you're having trouble communicating with your child. And I'm talking tweens and teens, but this is equally, I believe, as effective for younger students also. Yeah. So yeah, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Like, that's important. And I do know that, some of the older kids are a little more resistant to going. And I would also say there's some parents who have some really deeply embedded beliefs about therapy, who are resistant to therapy. And I would encourage you to maybe revisit those beliefs about it. Yes, Dr. V.
So I just wanted to add, as I'm listening, and that there are so many forms of therapy, right? So I also want to encourage families to seek out things like music therapy and art therapy, especially if you have students that are particularly drawn to those areas. And even if they aren't, you may find that that is something that they can relate to. And so a lot of times people don't really default to an art therapy or a music therapy, but that is also something else, an alternative to explore outside of the traditional therapy.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I thank you for that. I did 4 weeks ago now, the first installment of this Facebook series was with a panel of students. and they were they were 5th through 12th. And it was interesting because I did ask the kids at one point, like, what did you learn about yourself during this time? And it stuck with me. It so stuck with me. One of the students, middle school students, said, I learned that I like fishing. I never had time to go fishing before. I went fishing and I found out I like it. I kind of like hanging out there in the quiet, not really talking too much, just waiting for the fish. Right? And so that was very therapeutic for him, even though it's not therapy. But I think we can find other ways to reach our students right now, reach our kids right now. And I think it's really important for us to be open to that. So yeah, thanks for that. I didn't even think of that. There's so many other forms of therapy. If your child is into dancing, I'm sure there's some sort of movement therapy. I think all of those things are important. My son discovered Calm app during this pandemic, and actually like came to me and said, it's $69 for the year, Mom. Is that okay? Would you buy it? And I'm like, heck yeah. If you're willing to use it, yeah. And I don't even ask him. He does it daily. So I think like being open to some other things, he just knew he needed something to sort of help him get centered for, a moment during the day. And so he finds time during the day and does it himself. And so I think that's part of it, is just being open and listening to our kids, like just listening to them about what they feel like they need. Lily, yes.
I just want to go back to something that Dr. V said that really resonated with me, that I wish more parents understood, is that a lot of times, especially for people who are new to therapy, they'll start with a therapist and it's not going well, and they don't realize that it's not the therapy that's not working. It's probably the chemistry with that therapist. And your relationship with your therapist, your psychologist, whoever, your psychiatrist, is much different from the relationship that you will have with any other healthcare professional. And I've been talking to this with a friend of mine, an adult, who has for years, because of a bad experience she had with a therapist 10 years ago, really needs help but won't go back because in her mind, therapy sucks. And I've told her, this person may not even be a bad therapist. He or she is just not the right therapist for you. So with my son, I feel like both me and my son got lucky in that we're talking to psychologists and psychiatrists who really click with us, and they understand and they're open to hearing about, these are the things that I'm working through right now. And so in a way, it's almost like a personal trainer where they want you to be healthy. But then if you go in and you say, I'd like to work the legs today, they will work the legs with you. So I kind of feel that way, where these days, for example, my children are very apprehensive about going back to school because of all of the violence against Asians that's been happening. And though my son's therapist herself is not Asian, she knows this, and I know that she is open and willing to speak to him about this. So yeah, if you don't find the right therapist at first, don't write off the therapy. Just keep looking. Like, that's totally okay.
Thank you for that. So we are about at the end of our time. Before I wrap, I want to say, if you're listening, don't be stuck that your child has to go to therapy or that you have to go to therapy. Sometimes having just a really amazing support group. I have a mom group that we call ourselves the Coffee Crew, and of moms that I just met in elementary school. And when I say they've been such an amazing support for me, and we support each other. So sometimes that's it too. I'm not anti-therapist, but I'm also saying be open to how else you can be supported and how else your child can be supported, and maybe it's a small pod of friends that they see regularly. Maybe that's it. We're all trying to figure this out. Like, nobody has the answer to it. And there is no one answer to it, because it's a different time. None of us have ever experienced it, and no one way fits for everyone. And so I encourage you to keep listening to your kids, paying attention to your kids, and finding resources that help your family, that make sense for your family and your child. I want to thank both Sherry Warner for being here today, Dr. Levita Johnson, as we are calling her Dr. V today, for being here. You can find both of them online, sherrywarner.com, and then defaulttohappy.com is where you'll find Dr. V. Thank you to all my parents for being here today. Thank you to Speak Up for doing this series, for caring so much about our families and our students, that you are willing, Speak Up, to put this much time and energy and effort into supporting families. So thank you to Speak Up. Thank you to Katie. Thank you to the entire Speak Up team. I can't even list you all because there's too many to list, but you all make this possible. Thank you so much for being here. If your child needs help, there are resources available. There is a question about what if you can't afford therapy. I am here to tell you there's all kind of therapy options, from sliding scale therapy to free therapy to paid therapy. You just have to seek out the resources. There's so many there, but there are so many students who are being supported right now free of charge, and then some on sliding scale based on your income. So just look for them. They're out there. Speak Up may even drop some in the chat, some links to some, but there's so many mental health services available to students and to entire family, because again, I say this in every show, we are all in this together, and we're going to make it through this together as our children roll back into school and as we roll back into the new way of life, because there will be no old way. It's just going to be new. I encourage you to be patient, to be loving, to be kind, to care for yourself and care for your kiddos, and to join us again here in 2 weeks. Share this with your friends, share it on Facebook. Leave us some notes in the chat. I personally will not respond, but I promise you someone from Speak Up will. Thank you so much, everyone. I appreciate you. See you here next time.